Okay, good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us for day 3 of our annual Mayor's Megawatt Challenge Forum. If you don't already know me, my name is Catherine Wilson, and I'm the manager of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge, a program that's been working with municipalities since 2003 to improve the energy use in their own facilities. This is the 9th annual forum and the first in an online format. So the overall theme of our 3-day event is practical pathways to net zero carbon buildings. Today, we'll be exploring different options for financing your energy and carbon reduction projects. Our members have expressed time and again that financing their projects and initiatives continues to be a significant challenge, which is why we're devoting an entire session to this. So once again, I'd like to thank our program sponsors, Simcoe Refrigeration and Enbridge Gas, who have worked closely with us to help our municipalities achieve our objectives. I also want to thank Johnson Controls and Vancity Community Investment Bank, who have sponsored this session. So concerning logistics, if you have any technical questions about the Zoom platform, please enter these into the chat box. We'll have a chance for questions following each speaker. If you have any questions for individual speakers related to content, please enter them into the Q&A box, and they will be addressed at the end of each individual presentation. And we'll also circulate a question and answer document with the proceedings after the event. So today's agenda. So Jillian will provide the opening remarks, and then we will turn to funding your projects with guaranteed performance contracting. So Daryll Nazarene and Ashley Jones from Johnson Controls will talk about energy performance contracting in municipalities. And we have a guest speaker, Mike Angeli from the city of Marquette, Michigan, to talk about their energy performance contracting program. And then we'll turn it over to Jonathan Frank from Vancity Community Investment Bank, and he'll be discussing financing net zero carbon and energy efficiency projects. And then we'll turn it over to Tami Rothery from the District of Summerland, British Columbia, who will speak to their Green Revolving Fund. And we have Craig Stevens from the town of Caledon, who will speak to the town of Caledon Energy Revolving Fund. And we'll briefly touch on other financing options and resources available to you and the closing remarks. I will now turn it over to Jillian Henderson, Director of the Climate Challenge Network, to provide the opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Catherine. And I did want to reiterate right off the bat that we are recording this session, and this will be available for everybody. It's usually available within a day or so after this event. So please share this with other people within your municipality or anyone else you think might benefit. We do post them on our website, so that is a great place to go look at past sessions and also previous webinars that we've done. We do try to build on a lot of them, so it is kind of iterative process. Good to go back and take a look. As Catherine mentioned before, and we've mentioned a few times, the content of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge is member driven, and one of the things that comes up frequently is financing. The issues and challenges and questions you've sent us is really sent us on this mission to find experts and answers to try to help you achieve your goals. Many of you have low energy or zero carbon emissions goals. They're pretty ambitious, and for pretty ambitious goals, you're going to need some pretty ambitious financing. These goals demand projects that require significant shift in energy sources and reducing energy consumption and emissions. You're going to be investing in plans and systems that cost more than like-for-like replacement. So for many municipalities, funding these plans and projects is going to be the first and possibly the most difficult hurdle, apart from maybe getting it approved through council, which is another whole issue. So this is one of your big issues that comes up time and time again. So we heard you, and responding to your concerns and your questions, we've brought a great panel of speakers today to talk about new and ingenious financing tools to meet these goals and start down the path or keep going down the path of the low or no carbon future. Our presenters today will provide a view into a few of these financing options for these projects. Absolutely, we welcome questions. This is a great source of information and a really good chance for you to to kick the tires, as it were, on some of these financing options. So without further ado, I'll hand it back to Catherine and get us started.
Great, thanks, Jillian. Okay, so before we dive into the content, for those that don't know us, because there's a few on the line who don't, we're the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge. We've been around since 2003, where we worked with the Toronto Region Conservation. And then in 2019, the Climate Challenge Network was formed, really to have a rapid scaling up of reductions in emissions caused by buildings, and sort of the big tent idea. So collaboration among municipalities, industry, academia, and utility companies. So really the collaborative effort working together to achieve these really, really aggressive goals. And really the collaborative approach is the way to go, we think. The four main pillars of the program are data-driven identification of savings potential and identification of your high potential buildings, which is critical. Evidence-based determination of best practices and the sharing of those best practices between the members. So between the energy managers, facility managers, operators, and others in the municipality as well. And then networking between like-minded organizations, so bringing in utility companies and other organizations working to achieve the same goals. And recognition is always really important. On day one, we presented our 10% energy savings awards. And on day two, the leadership awards for municipalities that have buildings that achieved their targets. And they always turn into great case studies. So we have some excellent case studies, hopefully lined up for next year based on the buildings that receive these awards. So today's speakers, I'll just introduce them one more time. So we have Daryll Nazarene from Johnson Controls, as well as Ashley Jones from Johnson Controls, speaking to energy performance contracting and how that can be used in municipalities as an alternative financing option. We have Jonathan Frank from Vancity Community Investment Bank, speaking to some of the financing options they have available. We have Tami Rothery from the District of Summerland, British Columbia, speaking to their Green Revolving Fund, and Craig Stevens from the town of Caledon, speaking to their Energy Revolving Fund. So without further ado, I will turn things over to Johnson Controls, to Daryll and to Ashley, to talk about funding their projects or funding your projects with guaranteed performance contracting. Good morning, Ashley. Good morning, Daryll.
Good morning.
All right, I just want to make sure my screen's shared now. Everyone good?
Yep. Looks great.
Yep.
So thank you very much for having us here today. I'm going to go on with the presentation. So some of you might be familiar with Johnson Controls, might know us from different types of equipment we do, but the leg of Johnson Controls that we are part of, Daryll and I, is the performance infrastructure team. So it's a unique division of Johnson Controls that focuses on addressing issues like deferred maintenance, aging equipment, modernization, and replacing of aging infrastructure. And then today also part of our message is improving operational and energy efficiency, which is what you guys are all here to listen about. So the past 2 days, well, it wasn't 2 days, but the past 2 weeks, 2 days of the seminar, we heard about paths to net zero. And you know what you want to get done for your facility, but you might be wondering how on earth do you get that funded? So we work with municipalities across Canada, and these are some of the challenges that we see facing down on the communities. So funding obviously being a huge one, attracting new citizens. Two items I like to focus on is we had talked about increased deferred maintenance. So those are items that you need to get done, but there's also desired facility modernization, such as getting to net zero or different improvements you want to get done. We also see items like asset management, which is a huge focus nowadays. Safe neighborhoods, sustainability is something that is a term that we constantly hear. So really our projects really focus on all these items, as all these items are tied in. So what we're talking here today is about guaranteed performance contracting. So we use the reduction of energy, water, your O&M, your emissions and waste, and we use these items as a procurement tool that allows you to leverage those savings to be able to do the building improvements you want to get done, like your net zero ice rinks. Pie chart on the left is a sample of where we would find those savings. So you have your LED lighting, your water, your building automation, your HVAC, grants and rebates. But now you can find those savings and you can really use them wherever you want to get done. Typically what we find is municipalities and the public sector, and really even in your own home, you may go and get your own lighting done, for instance, but meanwhile, you still have other items that you want to get done or other items that are falling apart. So what we do again is we leverage those savings from the items on the left to be able to get to the other items and infrastructure items that you want to get done. How it's done is we would look at your current operational costs. So we really look at an aggregated cost. So in this term, you might be looking at your community center. We might not be looking just at your ice rink. We're able to look at the facility as a whole or multiple buildings. But let's say we're looking at one facility. We would look at your current operational costs. And typically we're able to find savings from anywhere from 15 to 35% total of your building. We then use those guaranteed energy savings to help pay for the capital projects that you need to get done. And once they're all paid off, your building is now operating at a lower cost of repayment. So the key is here is it's guaranteed. So it's all taxpayer neutral. If there's any shortfalls, Johnson Controls is responsible, or the company that you partner with in terms of energy performance contracting would be responsible for making those payments or to be able to rectify the issue so that you're now operating where it was promised. Daryll, did you want to chime in there at all?
I think that covers it. If people have questions, we can certainly field them at the end.
No problem. So I work best with examples. So I'm going to take $1 million, which might be a large spend for some of the communities out here, but it's just a nice round number for me. So if we looked at your facility and had $1 million of utility spend, if we're able to save 20%, that's $200,000 a year. If you take $200,000 a year and you spread it out over 10 years, you're left with $2 million worth of deferred maintenance and infrastructure improvements you can get done, such as your net zero items. The reason I have the other example is this is not a cookie cutter solution. We work with the municipality to find the best possible solution for them. So you can take those same savings, and if it makes sense for life cycle costing, we can spread it over 20 years and we still stick with you for the entire duration of the project. It's more complicated return on investment items such as windows, CO2 reduction, which is what we're talking about, battery storage, security, even COVID related items that you can aggregate into these projects to be able to find your solutions, all funded with the energy savings, again, on a taxpayer neutral solution. I'm going to turn this over to Daryll now to finish up the rest of this.
Thanks, Ashley. So in terms of the audience who are here, predominantly your focus is on sustainability. If you look at managing a municipality's energy and sustainability demands. So everything that we do is put fully in context of understanding how your municipal CDM or your conservation demand management plans are being realized through the kind of work that Ashley is referencing. So when we take an approach to developing a project, we always do it through the lens of understanding how you're managing the social, the economic, and the environmental impacts of the components of the project. So any measures that are being implemented, we always have those targets in mind. So when we design the project in collaboration with you, it helps address those CDM plans that the municipalities have in place. You know, not to belittle or diminish the fact that the times that we're in, we're all very keen on working to try and stimulate the economy and try to grow business back and bring our pay for all these benefits that we're being given now by the governments at all levels, federal, provincial, etc. So that's kind of our focus and our contribution. I think it'll have long-term lasting impacts. So if you can move to the next one. So before I go on too long and they'll give me the hook, I just want to make sure I just cover through the process here in terms of how we approach it. What Ashley described in terms of the process itself, it starts with a fairly innocuous screening process that we work with the municipalities to identify what the potential opportunities might be. So at this level, there is really a cost implication to the municipalities because we understand it's just at a very early stage. So we work together with you, gathering utility data, doing some benchmarking on your existing facilities, getting a sense of where the potential opportunities might lie, and do they address those CDM demands that we talked about earlier. Having done that, we come back and then we would present to you and your teams the findings. And at that point, we can decide whether or not we need to take a deeper look. And still at this point, there really is no cost impact to the municipality. This deeper look, I mean, the first step is essentially an academic exercise. The second step, the box you're seeing there, is much more focused on putting some boots on the ground and understanding exactly what's making that environment react the way it does. So that's an engineer coming on site, walking the facilities. It's typically a one-day event, and coming back then with a much more specific list of measures and high-level costing to give you a sense of what size, what the content or the component of this project might look like. So at that stage, then the team at the municipality has an option to decide whether they want to pursue. Now, given that we're in the public sector, we're very sensitive to that. So typically, depending on your governance processes, you would typically go out and procure, solicit input from industry to determine who you would partner with to realize those opportunities that were, that were screened with you together in the screening and the preliminary analysis process. So once that that procurement process is complete, typically in the form of an RFP or an RFQ that takes place, the partner then works in collaboration, and that's a really critical component. I think Catherine mentioned it earlier in terms of it's a collaborative effort that takes place. And that third box is where you actually make the first commitment to, it's essentially a letter of intent that's done at that stage to say that we're going to go ahead and do some detailed feasibility study on the process to understand exactly what it is that we're going to focus on, which measures. For example, Ashley put a list up, either lighting, could be chillers, boilers, ice rinks, refrigeration, whatever the focus could be. It also could be longer term measures like window replacements, rooftops, quite frankly, renewables in terms of solar and cogeneration for that matter, or biomass. So it all depends on what the focus and the goals are. So that's what gets done at that third box. Once that's done and we come back and present those findings to you with a guaranteed maximum price on the project, so you know exactly what you're buying, you know exactly what the costs are, and most importantly, you know exactly what the savings potentials are from those measures that we've identified together. At that point, we enter into an agreement with the municipality to sign a contract. That's the first point that there's a formal contract that takes place. As you can see, there's a fair amount of time elapsed so far, and implementation starts. So that's the construction period that you're looking at. Typically 12 months. It could be shorter depending on the measures. It could be a little longer depending on the complexity of the measures. So typically around 12 months, construction is completed. And once the construction is completed and substantial is agreed upon by both parties, then our team will go forward and measure and verify. So the big difference between us and a traditional general contractor doing this kind of work is once they're completed, they move on. We have the privilege of staying with you to ensure that you're getting the results that we identified from the outset. So that's critical from the ongoing process, is to make sure we measure and verify those savings with you to guarantee that outcome that we promised. So that's a fairly lengthy explanation of the process. If there are questions later, well, I'm happy to field them. Go ahead. So again, quickly, in terms of the type of projects that we've done, they vary from, we do a lot of work in the public and the private sector, commercial and industrial, but predominantly public sector. And the focus is on areas like higher ed, healthcare, lots of work in healthcare, lots of work in K-12 and municipalities. And we've got good examples in all of them, and they scale anywhere from buildings to distributed energy storage, to microgrids, depending on what the requirement is for the municipalities and what your goals are. So we can give you lots of good examples. So rather than hear me go on, what we did was we invited a municipality that we've done some work with in Michigan, and I'll put Mike on and he can tell you exactly what the city of Marquette did and what their experiences were with the project. So happy to introduce Mike. Mike, over to you.
Good morning, everybody.
Catherine, did you have questions that you wanted to answer in between, or do you want to address them afterwards? You're on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. We can just address the questions at the end. That's fine.
No problem.
Yep.
Okay, now me.
Go ahead, Mike.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you this morning. And for those of you that aren't aware, Marquette is a community of about 22,000 people on the south shore of Lake Superior. We're in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, often confused with as being part of Canada. And we actually go so far as to share the accent, I think, on more than one occasion. You know, it's a pleasure for me to talk to you about this, and I'll hit some of the high points. If there's questions at the end or later on, I'll be happy to answer. But Marquette began looking at this program back in 2017 when we were approached by JCI. And the first thing I will tell you is that, you know, it almost seems too good to be true, or it seems like something that's not worth spending your time on, because basically what JCI is proposing is a system for you to not only improve energy use, but to save money and to actually improve some of the infrastructure that you have, all with existing dollars, basically. But the first piece of advice I will give you is that I would take the time, if you're interested or if you have infrastructure needs, which I'm sure you all do, to at least take the time to look at this, to examine it. A lot of my staff was trying to convince me it was not worth the effort, not a waste of time, but I took the step of spending time with JCI, and once you get the details of how this actually works, it starts to make sense. And in the end, it turns out to be a very good effort. I won't lie about anything, and I'll be totally honest. I mean, there's an expense associated with this. I mean, it's going to cost you to employ JCI. I mean, you might as well get over that hump right away and understand that you know, they're not giving away anything here, but you can build those costs into the whole program, and it's easily handled. But we went through JCI. We had a lot of infrastructure that we were falling behind on. Coincidentally, this infrastructure, or some of this infrastructure, if replaced or repaired, would contribute to our energy savings in addition to, you know, just being new equipment, I mean, or better service. You know, it improved our carbon footprint. So there was, you know, multiple benefits here. We, in the end, ended up spending almost $28 million on improvements, which seems like a lot. We didn't start there, but once the program got going and needs started to come forward, we thought we'll get what we can. We'll fix what we can. With a guaranteed savings of 42 million over 20 years. And when you put those numbers together, if you got to spend 28 million now and you're going to save 42 over the next 20 years, it makes perfect sense to do it. You know, the problem with a lot of people, a lot of commissions or councils, is they want to see immediate satisfaction or immediate benefit. But, you know, knowing that you can save that amount of money over a period of time, I think is something you really have to consider. We did things we needed to do just because they needed to be new, and we did things to improve our energy footprint. For example, we updated 22 intersections with traffic control signals. Not something that necessarily was a huge energy saver, but something that really was a benefit to the community, something we needed to do, didn't have the money to do, kept getting pushed down the road as a project. We replaced, and this is something you need to think about, we replaced over 3,000 water meters. And that had a double benefit to us in that once you start reading your water use correctly, you actually may realize an increase in your water revenue because old meters tend to not record properly. We replaced 2,500 streetlights, which was a huge energy savings for us, reduced our electric bills tremendously. You know, at the same time improved our street lighting. You know, that's good for the public. We have bike paths in Marquette, and we have multi-use paths. We've increased a bunch of new lights or changed a bunch of lights there. Probably one of the bigger things that we did was we installed 2 cogeneration plants, electric cogeneration plants at our wastewater treatment plant. And essentially, the wastewater system plant is run by those generators, which is fueled by methane produced by the plant, right? I don't know what it's like where you are, but every few weeks or months here, we were burning that off and it would just dissipate or disappear. But now we're actually able to capture that methane, use it. And to be honest with you, that's where our largest cost savings existed. The electricity to run that plant was a huge cost for us, and it saved us a lot of money. Side note to that is that you have to develop a relationship with your electrical company, your electrical supplier, so you have to work with an outside entity to make sure that's a smooth transition. You know, we improved HVAC in the city, we improved heating systems in the city hall, we did IT upgrades. You were talking about chillers earlier, Daryl and Ashley. I mean, our Lakeview Arena, which is, I mean, we're a big ice community. We're a big hockey community, right? Just like most of Canada. And our chillers were probably 40 years old, cannibalized some to keep others running, totally inefficient. I mean, ridiculous electric costs. And through this program, we were able to replace 2 of those chillers, and we were saving roughly, I'd say, $3,000 to $5,000 a month during the peak season in electric costs. I mean, those are the kind of things that JCI will go through as part of their study and estimate what your savings will be. So, you know, I guess I will tell you that, you know, if nothing else, it's worth spending some of your time to sit down with JCI, or, I mean, I don't work for JCI, but I'm going to say this type of energy saving program is something worth considering. But it's a little scary at first, but it's something that I think once you get into the details, you'll understand. It may be the only way that you can fund some of these projects. I know it was the only way that we could. I didn't have the capital budget. We have a list, like you probably do, of projects that have been on this list, wish list for years, if not decades. You'll get to them, you'll get to them, you'll get to them, and eventually you never do, and it falls apart. We took a bulk of that list that we had and fixed a lot of things here with these energy savings dollars. So I'll stop there. Is there anything else I should probably add? Please help me out here.
Thanks so much, Mike. That was fantastic. Checking our questions here. These ones seem to be directed at JCI, but I do have a question for you. What was, in your mind, the biggest benefit you could see to the energy performance contracting?
Well, the biggest benefit for us was, I think what I just mentioned a minute ago, is that we were able to address large capital improvement concerns all at the same time. We had this list that was growing, wasn't getting any smaller, that needed to be dealt with, you know, and I'm not the kind of manager that's going to be happy about leaving that for future generations to take care of. So that was a huge benefit. The other benefit that I really enjoyed with this whole project is, you know, for us to do these projects on our own would have taken hundreds, if not thousands, of individual man hours and dollars by my staff, which I don't have, or I may have, but not be able to allocate. But it was really a pleasure, and I mean a pleasure, to have JCI come in once the contract was settled, and they take over everything. I mean, it's like having a whole nother department under my, not under my control, but working for me. And they took care of all this stuff. I mean, they did the contracting, subcontracting. In Michigan, or in our city here, we have a tendency to, or we have a rules that the commission has to approve every individual expenditure, but we were able to set this up so that the commission just approved JCI to do everything as a subcontractor, so we didn't have to get into that kind of detail. All we knew was this is what was going to be done, this is what was going to be fixed, and here's what it was going to cost, and they did it. I had weekly updates, which are helpful, I think. You know, you need to do that, but I mean, my staff was a huge sigh of relief when I told them they didn't have to do this themselves. I mean, you'll get a few smiles. So.
Yeah, I could see that being a major benefit, especially for the smaller municipalities that don't necessarily have the internal capacity to be able to handle such a project. So I could see it being particular benefit for the smaller ones, but even the larger ones as well, have all of that handled at once, for sure. Another question I had, what would you say was the largest hurdle you had when engaging in this whole energy performance contracting?
Well, you know, it's quite a, I want to say momentous, but it's a pretty good, it's a pretty large concept to get your head around, right? I mean, a contract, for example, and I won't lie, is pretty thick. It's got a lot of details, and you may have to spend some time going through it, but the biggest hurdle, I think, was just convincing people, including my commission, that this was worthwhile. I don't think it didn't take a long time, but it just took a significant amount of explanation and detail. And fortunately for me at the time, I had a commission that grasped the concept immediately and understood the necessity. And I had some commissioners that had been around a while, so they understood the capital improvement list wasn't getting any smaller and didn't look like it was going to get any smaller, so we needed to address this problem. And quite honestly, it was, you know, it was a great achievement, I think, for us.
Yeah, great. So I think you've sort of touched on this already, but if you had one piece of advice that you could give to another municipality or municipalities regarding this, what, I guess, beyond just trying it out and looking into it, was there any other piece of advice you would have?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it this way, but it you know, it comes across as a sales pitch, right? It comes across as, I mean, as a municipal leader, you are approached all the time from different entities to look at this or try that. And so we look at these things with a certain level of skepticism, which is fine. But I mean, in this case, if you want to trust me, I guess I would take this as a, you know, this is one you should probably look at. I mean, it's worth spending the time on. And that's the biggest thing here, is because, you know, I think I mentioned it earlier, when I was forewarned by my staff that JCI was going to approach me about this. And they were telling me, you know, this is just a sales pitch, just, you know, you don't have to talk to them. Well, when they came in and talked, I took the time and it piqued the interest. And it, you know, that's something that I think those of us that are municipal leaders, we develop this shell of not listening sometimes to outside entities or ideas, because a lot of them are just sales pitches. But this is one I'm glad I took the time to spend listening to.
Fantastic. Okay, do any of the attendees have any questions for Mike while he's here? If you do, please enter it into the Q&A.
Catherine, there's one question which was specifically for Mike, which is, I assume the 42 million is cost avoidance as opposed to cost savings. Can you
Yes.
clarify?
Yes. Yeah. Correct. It's money that we would have spent somewhere else. You know, already planned. Which is another concept that I think people, I'm glad you brought that up, Jillian, because people need to understand what that is as opposed to savings.
That's a good question. I was curious about this citywide service agreement that JCI put together for you. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Because that's another aspect of the performance contract.
We entered into that. That's optional at the end of the contract. But from our perspective, in order to ensure the guarantee, we had to make sure that the equipment was functioning properly, doing what it was supposed to do. And from our perspective, that would have meant someone on our staff, or probably even adding to our staff to do that, and purchasing the specific equipment necessary to do that kind of work. And the cost to us were calculated, and it was just a lot cheaper, I believe, for us to contract with JCI to do that service work. And again, it's something I don't have to have my staff do. So those costs are also factored into the whole program as well. So
Voided service contracts that you don't have to get into with anyone else, right? Totally makes sense. There is a question, it might be more for Ashley and Daryl around.
I saw it.
Yeah, okay.
That's a good-
Do you want to answer that, Daryl?
Yeah, you know, Jillian, it's a really good question. It ties right into what Jonathan's about to get into. So, I mean, I'll let Jonathan sort of speak to that a little bit more, but just to preempt, not to avoid the discussion, it's the questioner is correct. I mean, typically Johnson Controls does not fund the project directly, but we will secure funding. But the second part of the question is on the leverage on the municipality's balance sheet. It can be done both ways. It doesn't have to be. It can be treated off as well. But I'll let Jonathan get more into that. He's about to, I think, clarify or expand on that as well.
We can, Jonathan is definitely one of the type of tools or companies that we would use, or that the municipality would go to be able to source the funding. Yes.
That's right, and I will get more into it, but Daryl's right in that there are solutions for it to be on balance sheet or off balance sheet, depending on how the contracting is structured. And I'll show an example of that.
Fantastic. Okay, I just wanted to go over a few of the questions that were in the question and answer verbally, in case anyone isn't able to see that or access that for some reason. So we had a question, as an example, if we agreed to a 10-year term, would you complete M&V annually over the 10-year term?
So yes, if the contract's 10 years, we're with you for 10 years. If it's 25 years, we're with you for 25 years. We come on a quarterly basis, optimize the system, tweak them, and make sure that you are recognizing those savings, provided that you want us around for that long. Occasionally, municipalities or the entity notices that they're getting the savings and they say we don't need you anymore. But no, we are committed to staying with you for the entire duration of the contract, provided that you want us there. Daryll, did you want to elaborate on how the measurement and verification is done?
I'm not sure if that was you answered the question exactly right, actually. So that was it. I think that was the question I was asking, the duration. It's not so much in the process. And you're correct. In terms of the duration, it all depends. It's in the municipality's control. If they're looking for terminating the measurement verification process somewhere midterm, that's absolutely within their purview.
Great. Thank you very much. And one more question, just to reiterate the question that was asked, was in relation to the building energy management system at Toronto Community Housing. And they had asked if they could get more info. And yes, you said you could provide.
Yeah, we'll be happy to do it, Catherine. In terms of
Okay.
just so that the caller knows, it's been a while, so I apologize. I believe there was some Johnson Controls building management systems part of that solution, but there's most likely multiple BMS applications involved. It's a couple of the references I provided earlier, for example, at Wilfrid Laurier University, that was a Siemens control system, energy building management system. So really, we're vendor agnostic when it comes down to that. There's lots of options out there, and we'll absolutely work with whatever's the preference for the municipality.
That's great, Daryl. That's the perfect segue to what my next question was. So if a municipality has systems that are not Johnson Controls products, do they have to change all of their systems to Johnson Control products?
I'll let Ashley expand on that then.
Absolutely not. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're a complete subset of Johnson Controls. I actually came from the fire side of the industry, working with Simplex systems, if you're familiar with that. So this is a whole new world. We're solution based. So we work with you guys to determine what the best product is and the best subcontractors. So we don't necessarily just use Johnson Controls subcontractors. A lot of times people have local preferred contractors, and as long as we're still able to meet those metrics that we've determined during our agreement, we're more than happy to use it. And at times it's not going to make sense to rip out a whole building automation system that isn't Johnson Controls, to put it in Johnson Controls one, because that's going to elongate your payback, possibly not make you overly happy. So I don't know, Mike, did you have all just Johnson Controls equipment in there, or did you find local contractors and everyone accommodating towards you?
Yeah, Johnson Control is very accommodating in that regard. I mean, we did not, Johnson Control would make a recommendation as to what product or which contractor to use, and they handled it all. We did have in a similar sense, we did have an understanding with Johnson Control as part of this agreement that they would use local as much as they could. That was important to our commission, that the jobs, if they could stay local, would stay local, and Johnson Control did honor that. So yeah, no, we had a lot of flexibility in that regard.
Fantastic. Okay, if we don't have any other questions, you may need a few minutes to think about them. So why don't we move on to Jonathan to speak to what Vancity Community Investment Bank has to offer. And then we have another Q&A session following that presentation, which will give you time to maybe think of questions and how they sort of relate together. And we can address some additional questions in a little while.
Sounds great, thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you, Mike, for giving us your municipal perspective. Our members always really enjoy hearing from other municipalities. So thank you so much for providing your story to us.
You're welcome. Mike, clear to sign off, or you want me to stick around?
You know what, you're a busy man, so you're clear to sign off. If we have any other questions that come through for you, I can email them to you maybe, if that's okay, and then we can add them into the Q&A. Yeah,
sure. And I've talked to local managers about this program, so if someone has a question, they want to contact me directly, I'm happy to be available. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Take care. Okay, so Jonathan.
Great. Yeah, happy to jump right in. That was really a great to hear from Mike in the municipal perspective, and certainly I look forward to building on the discussion we've already had today. Before I jump in and share my first slide, I just want to say thanks to Catherine and Jillian and everyone who has helped organize this event. I think it's really an incredibly important topic. It's one that I'm certainly passionate about. I have a 2-year-old son, and I'm optimistic that we'll be visiting many net zero buildings in our community in his future. My own personal background prior to getting into financing was in project development. So I've been working for engineering and construction companies to deliver clean energy projects for clients, including municipalities and school boards. So I think I can bring a well-rounded perspective to the types of projects we're talking about today. And I will share my screen now. Hopefully this is a smooth operation. Okay, looks good.
Looks great.
So as mentioned, I'm with Vancity Community Investment Bank. My name is Jonathan Frank, and I'm the Director of Clean Energy Business Development. So who are we? We are Vancity Community Investment Bank, but you could call us VCIB, and we're a bank on a mission to finance a sustainable tomorrow. We are the only Canadian bank exclusively focused on partnering with organizations that drive social, economic, and environmental change. And we are born from the values-based community-first model sharpened over 70 years by Vancity, a financial cooperative with over 500,000 members. VCIB recently acquired CoPower, which is how I had the pleasure of joining Vancity. I was one of the managing directors at CoPower. And CoPower is Canada's first sustainable investment platform and a leading provider of financing to clean energy and energy efficiency projects. And together, we will accelerate investment in affordable and sustainable communities. Our main areas of focus are social purpose real estate, where we prioritize financing for affordable housing and high impact community projects, including co-working spaces, arts and cultural hubs, and heritage buildings. And clean energy financing, where I focus, of course, where we connect clean energy developers and installers like JCI and building owners with the financing they need for clean energy generation and efficiency projects. We also offer impact investing products and a full suite of impact banking products. And we're really looking for clients who are wanting to share in this vision of changing the face of finance and using the tools of finance to create positive impact in our communities. Of course, the big problem we're talking about today is that about 30% of Canada's emissions come from our built environment, our buildings. Yet the distributed clean energy and efficiency market is underserved by mainstream finance. Despite the widespread availability of clean technologies, building and community scale projects are often stalled due to the upfront capital costs. At the same time, 7 out of 10 investors describe themselves as interested in sustainable and investment investing, but access remains limited. So we connect project financing with values aligned investors. We have 2 main investment products, including CoPower's green bonds, which are accessible to all Canadians, and VCIB Impact GICs. If you're interested in these products as an investor, certainly reach out to me and I can connect you with our investing team. But I'll of course be focusing on how we deploy these funds back into the community to achieve more positive impact. So with the experience in clean energy development and lending through CoPower, our strength is really in finding innovative solutions to get your unique projects off the ground, built and scaled. We typically work with developers and installers, asset owners and managers, building owners, community cooperatives, and municipalities and related agencies. And we really finance a wide range of clean technologies, as well as the integration of multiple technologies. Everything from renewable energy to geo-exchange heating and cooling projects, EV infrastructure, green buildings and energy retrofits, of course, and waste to energy projects. We've also worked on some cogeneration projects, which were mentioned earlier by Johnson Controls. And to date, VCIB and CoPower have supported more than 1,650 individual clean energy and efficiency projects across Canada. That ranges from geo-exchange in residential homes, microfit and fit projects, as well as community solar financing. We've retrofitted over 400 condo buildings with LED lighting, done 2 deep energy building retrofits, and that's been about 35 million deployed as of about February last year. And when we update that number at the end of this year, we'll probably add another almost $20 million. Those projects to date have over 18,000 tons of CO2 avoided and counting. As one of our clients said, it makes a big difference to secure financing from a mission-aligned investor who both gets solar development and is in it for the same reasons we are. As I like to say, we're often not sitting across the table from our clients. We're really sitting side by side, problem solving together towards a common goal. This is an example of some of the projects we've invested in. And like I said, we really like to roll up our sleeves with our clients and create an optimal solution. One example on the far left is our residential geo-exchange projects in British Columbia. We helped a geo utility company provide geo-exchange heating and cooling as a service to the community. There's now entire communities that have no natural gas going into those communities. They're purely electric with geo-exchange as the main heating and cooling primary energy source. Interestingly, while those homeowners are not only having very stable energy prices, the thing that the community members often talk about is how quiet the community is and how nice it is because there's no loud HVAC buzzing in the summer. On the far right is some deep energy retrofits that we've done, and I'll actually dive more into a case study for the GTA condo project that we did this year. My team's main area of focus is a really specialized financing called project financing, where we generally are lending against the energy savings or the energy generation. And in many cases, it's referred to as non-recourse financing, where we're lending just to the project assets themselves. So we can come in at construction financing for projects that are shovel ready. We can provide short-term and bridge financing to help build and aggregate a portfolio of projects. So if you had multiple buildings in your community, we can set up a structure that allows you to finance them one at a time and then aggregate those into a larger portfolio to refinance. We can provide long-term financing or refinancing for operational projects. And we can also provide on-bill financing or PACE structures to support municipal or utility clean energy efficiency programs. Generally, we're looking for loan sizes between 1 million and 50 million for a single project or a portfolio. To the leverage question earlier, we can often provide between 60 and 80% debt financing of total project costs, and some structures do allow for 100% financing. We have competitive pricing depending on the risk profile, and we can often provide fixed rates for between 2 to 15 years and amortizations up to 25 years or longer. For construction financing, that can be as short as 3 to 6 months, and we can have the construction financing roll directly into a long-term financing solution. When it comes to project financing, we're typically looking at these 4 buckets of categories. The project itself, we're looking to be using well-established technologies, to be developed by experienced teams and to have experienced operations and maintenance providers, and to have the appropriate warranties and insurance in place. We look for the counterparty to have moderate and mitigated credit risk. In the case of municipalities, that's typically not a challenge. We're looking for renewable energy projects where they're expected to generate predictable long-term revenues, and efficiency service projects that include self-generation where the creditworthy or the counterparty is also creditworthy. Our security is typically on the project cash flows and material contracts themselves. So this is typically what I mean by non-recourse, is that we're actually secured by those energy savings or energy generation payments. And then we can take additional security on the equipment as appropriate. And in the case of energy efficiency services, sometimes projects do include recourse down to the counterparty. We're generally not taking project development risk. So some of the earlier stages that Daryll was referring to, we would come in once that work is done and you have a ready to go project. We will look at the construction risk and the operational risk to ensure it's moderate and mitigated. And of course, we can help with that. If we come in and we feel like it's not quite there yet, we might be able to provide some advice that would help you get to that level of risk appetite. And in many cases, we're able to have refinancing risk. So in a case similar to a mortgage on your house or a larger building, you have shorter loan tenors where you have a fixed rate, but you'd have a much longer amortization, and then you'd refinance over the life of the project. Of course, if you're thinking about your particular project and you're not able to check these boxes, that's okay, get in touch with us and we can work around that. In addition to our more specialized financing, since the CoPower team joined BCIB, we've been looking at how we can bring our sort of green lens to our traditional lending products. And so we now have a green commercial mortgage product and a green line of credit. So if the project financing approach isn't right for your municipality, we have other solutions that might work. So for building owners, we can offer new mortgages or increases to commercial mortgages to finance the energy efficiency retrofit or renewable energy solutions. In that case, we can actually underwrite the energy savings or the additional revenue of a on-site generation project to assess your net operating income and then reevaluate your loan to value ratio and unlock additional capital to pay for that building retrofit through your mortgage. In cases where you already have a mortgage and it's not feasible to refinance that, we offer non-revolving term loans to finance these projects. I mentioned earlier, this actually gets to the question that was asked earlier that Daryll had spoken to, where the actual financing sits. So on the left-hand side is the direct financing solution, where we would lend directly to that municipal building or the municipality itself, or in some cases an SPV, which is a special purpose vehicle, a company set up to own the project. And then in that case, the energy performance contractor like JCI has a separate and parallel agreement with that municipality or that project entity. On the other side is an indirect financing solution for the municipality, where we would be lending directly to an energy service provider. This is typically done under an energy savings performance agreement. And our recourse would be to that energy service provider. But we're also underwriting that energy savings, and our loan is, in both cases, is paid back through those energy savings. I mentioned, I talked a bit more about one of the projects we had done recently. While not a municipal building, it was a multi-measure energy efficiency retrofit. So in this case, I'll go back one second. This project was done under the indirect financing solution on the right-hand side. So it was done under an energy savings performance agreement. So in this case, we lent to the ESCO company that was undertaking the retrofit. And while the GHG emission savings here was only about 10%, certainly not close to net zero, really part of the objective here was to Ashley and Daryl's earlier points around avoiding future capital costs for replacing equipment, avoiding and reducing maintenance expenditures, and really just overall reducing utility costs. So this project, it was a 1980s multifamily residential building, 15 stories, about 190 units. And the energy efficiency measures included replacing existing makeup air units, installing condensing hot water boiler, installing high efficiency toilets and low flow shower heads, retrofitting common area lighting, and adding insulation to piping and decommissioning of redundant equipment. The total project was under $1 million, and the savings were about $70,000 per year, so about 23% savings across electricity, natural gas, and water expenses, saving 90 tons of CO2 equivalents per year, and had about a 9.2 year simple payback. As I mentioned, this solution was off balance sheet for the condo, and our loan was directly to the energy service provider. This project's also unique in that it is the first condo to receive the Canadian Green Building Council's Investor Ready Energy Efficiency Certification. So this is a brand new program. It's well established in Europe and the US, but new to Canada. And it's kind of like a lead certification for retrofitting. So in all of our projects, we would do detailed technical, financial, and legal due diligence. And on the technical side, that often means bringing in an independent engineer to verify all of the design, equipment selections, actual engineering, the actual ongoing measurement and verification. And for this particular project, we used the CAGBC's Investor Ready Energy Efficiency Certification as that third-party verification tool. So we received a detailed report from them verifying all of the energy savings that the ESCO was promising to the building owner, and that was that our loan was dependent on. So this is something that we're really keen on. We think it's a great program, something that municipalities might be able to benefit from, and something that I think can help scale up this market, given that it presents a fairly streamlined and cost-effective way to verify those energy savings. So how to work with us? Really, we're looking for long-term partnerships. So it's pretty rare that we would do just one project with somebody. Often you do one project and then you look for other ways to sort of build on that experience together. To get started, we begin by just reviewing the preliminary information. So if you're working with JCI, for example, we would review the initial proposal information they have. And based on that, we can provide you with a preliminary term sheet that would outline all of the key terms like loan tenor, amortization, your interest rate, the repayment process, and importantly, the conditions precedent to advancing funds, which we will tie directly into the project implementation work that someone like Johnson Controls would be doing. But once that term sheet is signed, we begin our detailed due diligence, which includes technical, financial, and legal review of all of the key project materials, and finalizes those conditions to financial close. As the last step, we would provide definitive agreements and issue the funding so we can negotiate the actual loan agreement, move forward with our investment committee approvals, and once fully executed, funding is issued. If it's a construction project and we're providing construction, then that funding would come at those key installation milestones during that 12-month installation process that Daryll referenced. And if the project's already built, then we would typically fund the full amount at financial close. Of course, if you're not really sure, or maybe you don't have a project that's formulated yet, don't hesitate to reach out anyway, because often it's great just to have an initial conversation, learn about your objectives, and from there we can really work sort of side by side through your process. Certainly, to get started, feel free to reach out to me at any time. And I thought I'd just leave you with a couple key takeaways. So number one is that we can help you, and we are motivated to do so. It's really our mandate. So if you need or want third-party financing to support a Johnson Controls type project, we would be keen to work with you. We can help to cover that upfront capital cost that takes to implement a retrofit project and be repaid through those energy savings. And we truly specialize in this kind of project financing. And as a result, in addition to the capital, we bring that added layer of technical, financial, and legal review as part of our underwriting process. And we can also use that expertise to help our traditional lending departments to do these kinds of projects under a mortgage or a term loan solution. Finally, we can make it possible for community members to earn a return on the projects happening in their backyards. So through our co-power green bonds or our VCIB GICs, we make it possible for both individuals and, for example, community foundations to invest in these projects, further broadening the positive benefits that these bring within our communities. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me with any questions or just have a conversation about your objectives and to see how we might be able to help. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. That was a really great overview of what you're able to offer to the municipalities. I don't see any questions coming in yet. It might take people a few minutes to formulate their thoughts. I think you answered most of the questions I had. So clearly, Vancity only doesn't focus in British Columbia. So now you're across the entire country, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So, so many people might be familiar with Vancity Credit Union, which is the BC-based credit union, and they are limited to operating within BC. So the role for Vancity Community Investment Bank is to really take that cooperative, values-based approach to lending across the country. So we are a Schedule I Canadian bank. I'm based in Toronto. That's where the VCIB office is. But my team can serve communities across the country.
Okay, yep, thanks for clarifying, because I think a lot of people think Vancity and then they think BC, so that's really good to know. So other than providing the capital, what additional benefits would come from working with you on a financing project? Yeah,
I think I think probably two or three things. I mean, obviously on the capital side, that upfront capital cost, especially if you want to go to net zero, is often fairly substantial. So we can cover, like I said, sometimes 80%, maybe even 100% of that initial capital cost. The additional benefits would be having that second set of eyes reviewing all of the technical and legal components of the project. So if we're lending to this project, we also want to know that those energy savings will materialize, that the equipment is top tier, that the warranties are backed by strong organizations, that the project has the right insurance in place should something happen. And so we would, do our diligence on these projects to ensure that that they will deliver as promised. So having that additional layer of review, I think, is a benefit to the municipalities and really to anyone that we work with. And it's not to say that we don't trust the work of groups like Johnson Controls. It's quite to the contrary. I think their track record speaks for itself. But this is just really, prudent investment practice that we bring to the table and support our clients with. The final thing, of course, would be really making it possible, as we like to say, for community members, individuals to put the planet in their portfolio. So the ability for individual constituents of your municipality to have access to investment products that are earning a payback that is from the projects in their backyard. And for all of our investors of our green bonds, we're able to show not only their financial return, but the specific carbon impact that their investment is having. And I think that's increasingly important for people, both individuals and institutions, as the world of capital and finance shifts towards ES&G metrics and impact metrics.
Jonathan, I had a question about, I wondered if you could elaborate a bit on district energy systems. I know that comes up every so often, and certainly municipalities are looking at that. It's one of the great opportunities municipalities have as opposed to individual building owners. Could you elaborate a little bit more on how you finance district energy systems?
Yeah, certainly. So I think there's often two models with district energy. Some projects are owned by the municipality themselves, and some are owned by third-party service providers, and we're happy to support both. In those cases, typically there's one large loan facility to the entity that owns the project, but we're actually looking at all of the contracts that project would have to service the community buildings, or in some cases, it's a mix of community and private sector buildings. District energy is certainly a highly efficient way in certain communities to generate the energy that you need. And I think, interestingly, what we're starting to see is, in addition to just district energy systems, which in many cases are natural gas powered, but starting to feed those projects with renewable natural gas, or in some cases, reducing the amount of fuel necessary by capturing waste heat along the way, which could be capturing the heat that is in all of our sewer systems. In the same way that geothermal works, the sewer is basically the same temperature year round and can be used actually as a preheating mechanism for the air in the district energy system through heat exchangers. So yeah, certainly something we're getting more involved in, and I think it's a great opportunity for communities. If you have an existing district energy system, there's also lots of ways to refurbish those or improve the efficiency of those, and we can certainly look at retrofitting those projects.
I think there are a couple of questions. There's one in the chat. Are the subsidies specific to municipalities, or can private companies integrating aligned projects utilize a special purpose vehicle?
Yes, in fact, to date, most of our work has been lending to private sector entities. In some cases, those serve municipalities. The SPV model, I think, is more common in the private sector than it is with municipalities. Most of our geo exchange projects, LED lighting retrofits, solar projects, we're lending to a special purpose entity that its sole purpose is to operate that project. So it would have the contracts with the end counterparty that creates the revenues. In cases where there's a particular feedstock coming in to supply that project, we're looking at those contracts. And that SPV model is really what allows, in many cases, projects to be off balance sheet.
Another question in the chat. In off balance sheet solutions, who's the asset owner, the ESCO or VCIB?
In the cases we've been involved in, it's been the ESCO. So that's not going to work for every ESCO company, but certainly we can sit down at the table with all the parties involved to find the right solution that meets your needs.
Great. I think there's no open questions here. So we can probably, at this point, we're going to continue the question and answer session. I think there's a few more questions we could explore here. Okay. So now that everyone's had time to sort of listen to what everyone's presented, Ashley and Daryl and Jonathan, are there any other questions that come up, things you'd like to know about? If not, I have a few more of my own. Let's see. I think we have a question in the chat. Oh, that's just Ashley saying she's there. Hi, Ashley. Okay. Well, why don't we jump into some of my questions? So in municipality, does the municipality have the option to finance the project directly through its own sources when engaging with energy performance contracting?
Okay, I guess that's for me. Absolutely, they can source through a company like Jonathan's. Alternatively, there is still the option of using capital if they're interested in doing it, and there's still many benefits of partnering with an ESCO, such as realizing the results immediately. Like our guest speaker Mike had said, you get to realize that immediately, and then also the guarantee that the savings are going to go back into their own capital as well.
Okay. And so I guess along those same lines, then, can Johnson Controls provide the capital? I think we know the answer, but just reiterate that.
Yeah, so we would partner with a company like Vancity, and we would come to the table with that and through those means.
Great. Okay. I guess another question for either Ashley or Daryl. How are your projects procured in reference to working within the public sector in compliance with the guidelines of the public sector?
So I think Daryl had mentioned that, but typically our projects are RFP'd. So the municipality would be picking a company that they want to partner with. So this isn't necessarily price-based, it's solution-based. So you would be picking who you feel you would want to move into that deeper step where we would come up with that guaranteed agreement with. Daryl, did you want to elaborate on that at all?
I think you said it right, Ashley. In terms of the process, it's really whatever the individual municipalities' governance requirements are, Catherine. It all depends on what their guidance is. If it's required, the council requires multiple vendors, multiple responses, then absolutely, you go back out to market. And again, we work deeply in public sector, so all broader public sector guidelines are conformed in this procurement process.
Great. Okay, thank you. I guess the question that may sort of be, well, not obvious. What happens, so you mentioned the guaranteed savings. What happens if those fall short? I think you did touch on that earlier. If you could expand a little on that.
Sure. So we would try our best to optimize the systems, including even putting in new equipment at our own cost to make sure that we're realizing those savings. And then ultimately, if we aren't able to do that, we would actually make up the difference.
Okay.
Yeah, and extending to what Ashley's saying, in terms of the process, Ashley's right. I mean, we would take every effort to mitigate the difference in if there is indeed a shortfall. Just to give the audience a sense, today we're one of the largest ESCOs in North America, so we've got over $6 billion worth of guarantees on our books today. Less than 1% of those are in shortfall. That means we're not perfect. We don't get it right every single time, but we will step up and make up that difference. But in most cases, we talked about the measurement and verification process. The intent of the process is to quarterly come back and show the municipality the savings that were actually identified, they're being realized. But in some cases, what it does is it allows the our engineer, the performance engineer, to come in and help and work with the municipality, continue to tweak their systems to make sure that those savings continue to be realized. Because we all know over time, things start to drift, right? It's not a question of laying fault, it's just the way it is. So that constant tweaking is something that we can do. By the way, it helps us and it helps the municipality. So that's kind of why we do that quarterly review with the municipality to make sure both the savings are there and they're being met. And in the event they're not, then again, we will make up that difference in a shortfall check.
Great. Okay, we have a question here. I'm not sure with Mike not being here. It was a question about how procurement was done in Mike's project in the city of Marquette.
Yeah, my understanding is they went out to public procurement, and I'm quite certain that that's how it was picked. Because again, the U.S. no different than Canada, and Johnson Controls won a bid based on the specifications that they put out in their RFP.
Right. Okay. Very good. Just to touch a little bit on COVID-19, because it is clearly not going away anytime soon. And it is a concern, of course, for many of the municipalities. So Johnson Controls, again, a question for you. Do you have any products or systems that can help assist the municipality in this area of mitigating the risks of COVID-19?
I can take that one.
Sure.
Johnson Controls is actually a great company to be able to help out with that. Even though we are vendor agnostic, it is great because we do have a lot of products and a lot of our team that is really well versed in it. HVAC obviously being a huge aspect of looking at mitigating COVID-19 risks. So being that we are an HVAC company, that definitely helps. We're also a security company, so we do have different items like thermal cameras, but the ultimate message of this energy performance contracting is really, we can put in any equipment that you want done. And again, leverage all those savings from the energy to be able to pay for those items that you want to get done. So it's kind of a twofold answer.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Jillian, did you have any questions? I think that covers my questions. I'm just trying to think from the heads of the municipalities here and what I would be asking. So that's where my questions are coming from.
Good, Catherine.
Nothing else there?
I think, I mean, the question I'd had to, oh, there's another question in the box, but the question I'd had to Ashley, which we discussed previously, is that the idea of a lot of the work we're looking at is focusing on GHG reductions, which may mean that there may not be immediate utility cost savings, especially if you're moving from, say, gas to electrification. What's your response to that, Ashley?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, and that's really where these projects also are really beneficial, because we have to be, like Daryl's slide that he had up in terms of addressing the triple bottom line. It's not always cost efficient to move away from gas. So that's what's nice about partnering with a company that does this through and through. Whether or not it's Johnson Controls, this is what these companies do, and this is where their expertise lies. So it's about taking those GHG emissions and lowering them, and also finding and funding those projects to do that and finding those savings. So all that is incorporated and in context with our projects, and we work with the municipality to find what their goals are.
Kind of looking at the larger picture helps water and other aspects, operational costs, those things will factor in, obviously.
Absolutely.
There's a question from to the panel. How does the panel expect the energy consumption to change post-COVID, specifically in commercial spaces?
Daryll, did you want to take that one?
Sure. You know, it's really a good question, because the situation that we're in, it ties exactly to the questions you were just speaking with Jillian about, Ashley. if you look at COVID today, one of the demands is greater demand on fresh air. So you start circulating greater amounts of fresh air in the building. It's going counterintuitive to energy performance, right? Because now you're running those fresh air systems at far greater refresh rates than you would typically to meet code. So what we've done is, that's where that balance comes in, and what Ashley was touching on is, we work with the municipalities to understand which areas would be most targeted for that kind of refresh rate requirement. So then we can apply technologies specific to certain areas for the air handling systems that are servicing those areas, for things like UVC or bipolar ionization, or a number of different technologies. It all depends, how am I balancing my cost controls with my safety requirements? And that's the crux of being much more specific in addressing the requirement versus taking a broad brush and saying it's the same for the entire facility. You have to be very surgical in terms of doing that kind of work. So the type of technologies Ashley was touching on, there's a wide array of technologies that we can bring to bear. It all depends on what's relevant to that specific municipality or that specific facility.
Great. Thanks so much, Daryll. That was really helpful. I think we have
Other question, Catherine?
Yeah. So question here, in order to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, what kind of changes, growth pattern does the panel think will be coming up in the energy efficiency industry? Big question.
Yeah, that's a big question. Yeah. Look, what we're seeing, and if you look at what's happening today in the markets, there's some significant amount of growth in renewables. If you look at the markets today and the type of companies that are just literally going vertical right now, it's all because there are big players like the US now re-signing back onto Paris Accords, right? So that demand for renewable technologies, wind, solar, are gonna get exponential really quickly. So to address those climate issues and the temperature related issues that we're trying to target, it's very, very challenging to sit here and pretend we're going to make incremental changes to make that big a global impact. It has to be done on a much more capital intensive basis. So that's what's being done at a federal level. We're doing a lot of work with federal government projects today. And the federal government is actually injecting capital in these solar projects to try and get to the 2050 net zero targets that they're espousing, because doing it in incremental ways is going to be very challenging to get there, to make that big a global impact, especially from a Canadian perspective. So hopefully that gives you some light on the question.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add, I think that's exactly right, Daryll. And I think what's important too is certainly our experience has been these individual technology classes, whether it's solar or geo-exchange or certain energy efficiency measures, work really well on their own. To get to net zero, it's really about the integration of these different technologies into a single solution. And that's really the kind of work that we've been talking about today. And I think that this is really a challenge of deployment. I think we have all the technologies we need. We need to get them out into the communities where they're going to make the difference. And I think that in many cases, they can generate a lot of energy savings, which we can reinvest in further emission reduction targets.
Great point, Jonathan. And I think what happens right now, a lot of the communities that I've been speaking with, they tend to able to do one thing here, another thing there, but you're not necessarily seeing the results. And every year that you're kind of putting it off, it's money out the window, and then also the environment that's not being, we're not rectifying our environments properly.
Okay, I think that's, we've got through all the questions from the audience, I believe, just double checking, yep. Okay, well, that was really, really helpful. So I really think we've covered like the big picture. So just to reiterate, so I think energy performance contracting has some great benefits, not only the technical expertise that you can provide, the financing, but really reducing the burden on the municipality. So a lot of them really don't have the time and the resources to be able to do this themselves. So really reducing that burden on them, helping get to the goals faster, having that single approval process for council, all of these things, along with the technical expertise, really make for a nice package. So thank you so much to Daryll and Ashley and Jonathan for not only sponsoring our session today at the forum, but really providing some really valuable insights and really get our municipalities thinking about the options they have. So thank you again. If anyone has any questions, further questions, I'll be happy to put you in touch with Daryll, Ashley, and Jonathan if you have any specific questions for them. And we'll again be circulating the recording of this and a question and answer document as well after the session.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
And you're more than welcome to stay on the line, of course, and listen to the rest of our presenters today. So without further ado, we will move on to revolving funds as another potential financing option for your municipality. And we are really pleased to welcome Tami Rothery from the District of Summerland in British Columbia to speak to their Green Revolving Fund.
Great. Good morning. Thank you, Catherine, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be invited to speak with all of you virtually this morning. It's a little early for me, so just bear with me here as I work through my presentation. First, I'd like to acknowledge that I am joining you from the traditional and unceded territories of the Syilx people of the Okanagan Nations, and that I'm quite privileged as a settler to be here and working and living in this beautiful part of our country. I'll just bring up my presentation here. And while I do, for those of you who, or maybe, Catherine, are you going to be sharing the presentation for me? No, I got it here.
Yep. I have a backup copy if you have any issue with the.
Nope, I think I got it here. It just asked me if I needed to pick somebody else off. So
there we go.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that now. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Summerland, we are located in the interior of British Columbia.
Tami, can I just put you on hold for 1 second? We're looking at the presenter mode.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, go up to display settings
Okay.
At the top. If not, we can look at it in this mode. That's okay too.
Oh, no, we don't want to do that. Up here. Great.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Tam.
Better now?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. All right, let's start again. So for those who are unfamiliar with Summerland, we are a community located in the interior of the Okanagan in British Columbia in the southern part of the province. We're about 45 minutes south of Kelowna and 1 hour north of the US border. We were incorporated in the early 1900s, and we have a population of just under 12,000. However, our community spans over 73 square kilometers, and we're responsible for almost $540 million of engineered assets. We haven't evaluated our natural assets yet, but it is in our asset management policy, and we are planning to do that in the coming years. Now, we are a rural, agriculturally based community. So we've got most of our land base used up by farmers. We are a very tourist heavy community, especially in non-COVID times. However, even during COVID, we've seen quite an influx, excuse me, of visitors from around BC. And we see tens of thousands of visitors every year. We also have an older than average population compared to the rest of BC. So lots of retirees on fixed incomes. And the reason I'm telling you this is because what really forms the backbone of Summerland is farmers, tourists, and retirees, which each have very low tax returns for us. And so we have very unique budget challenges, which means that we need to have unique and creative solutions to advance not only climate action, but also to control our energy expenditures. So just a little more information. Not only do we have these unique challenges with our tax base, but as I mentioned, we've got a lot of engineered assets. And for a community our size, we have some unique ones. We have one of the province's only level 4 wastewater and water treatment plants. We have 11 dams, our own landfill, 11 beaches, and we're one of only 5 municipalities in the province to own and operate our own electric utility. So again, giving us complex asset management challenges that require innovative approaches. We have 2 main financial policies that are forming the backbone of my presentation and what I'm going to speak to you about today, which is our Green Revolving Fund. The first is the Keystone Policy, which has a really long name. You'll see and hear I use a lot of words. So this is our climate action funding the reduction of greenhouse gas and corporate carbon neutrality policy. And basically what it is when I started, there used to be a program where we evaluated each different department and how much carbon they were generating, evaluated what the offset would be, billed it back to them. And it was quite complex. And it also penalized some of our departments that really don't have many options in terms of moving away from carbon-based fuels. And so we switched all of that to a simpler 0.001% of our total annual operating budget being allocated to climate action, which also helped to ensure that even as we were taking climate action and reducing our carbon footprint, we were still maintaining a solid base of funds available to help us tackle those more difficult problems and programs once we took care of that low-hanging fruit. Now in BC, we're very lucky. The province has a program called CARIP, the Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program, where by reporting back to the province annually on how we're doing around climate action, we get 100% on the carbon taxes that we've paid in the previous operating year. So taking those 2 amounts and putting them together, we have a operating budget for climate action, and all unspent funds from that annual operating budget roll straight into a reserve fund. So
Tami?
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you again. I was trying to tell you I was on mute. Your slides are not advancing, so we're still looking at the title slide.
Oh, so weird.
Could have had something to do with that extend duplicate screen, which is not my favorite.
Okay,
Oh,
let's try this. Sorry,
I
guys.
don't enjoy working with that. So I was trying to tell you in the chat, but it's, I know, very difficult to present and read the chat at the same time.
Okay.
And then I was muted, of course, so you couldn't hear what I was saying.
I'm sorry about that. Okay, try one more time here.
Just what you're saying, so interesting. So it'd be helpful to see the,
Yeah, no problem.
bit of the
Okay,
background.
so you guys can see.
Yes.
Okay. It must be something from being on the other side of the country. We'll blame it on that.
It will blame it on that for sure.
Are you seeing the financial policy slide?
Yes.
Now? Okay.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you again.
Oh,
There we
no,
go.
thank you.
Perfect.
Oh, that's
There.
great. Now,
Yeah,
okay,
That's really useful. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks, Tami. That's great.
no worries. Yeah, so you didn't miss too much, guys. Don't worry. It was just a long list of all the assets we own, so don't worry. Okay, so as I was mentioning, we've got this 0.001% of our operating budget, the CARIP funds that all roll into a reserve fund. And the reserve fund is specifically used only for greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And part of the reason for that is because in BC, we're quite fortunate that our electricity is very clean. About 95% comes from renewables. So I'm originally from Alberta. I've worked in this field for a long time. And so moving to BC, it's interesting because it's a very different conversation when we talk about energy reductions, because we have to exclude electricity basically and be very, very specific about what we're talking about. And so when we have conversations, Summerland is in the process of developing a large-scale solar array with battery storage, and we have to be very sensitive to people who say, well, solar isn't clean, solar isn't green, we already have green energy and LEDs and things like that. So our policy and all of the work we do is very, very specific to GHG reductions, which in BC excludes electricity. We also in the policy designate 90% of that fund for corporate emissions reductions. We used to have a lot of community groups coming forward to us, asking us to sponsor things that they were doing, you know, and it's all good work, but we really wanted to kind of take care of our own backyard first and make sure that the funds were going to our own corporate operations so that we could not only take care of our emissions, but also demonstrate new technologies and show the community what leadership looks like at a municipal level. The second policy is specific to the Green Revolving Fund. So we established this in 2019 using $50,000 in seed funding from that reserve that I just mentioned. We are the first Canadian governmental body to join something called the $1 Billion Green Challenge, which is run out of a philanthropic organization in the States that's encouraging public sector organizations across North America and internationally to collectively dedicate $1 billion to green revolving funds. And they're an excellent organization. They've provided us with a ton of support and resources getting started at no cost. They have a great resource library. And they also have a piece of software called GRITS that we found extremely useful. It's purpose-built for green revolving funds, and it has a very low annual cost. I think we pay something like $300 or $400 for the licensing for it, so very affordable. And we're able to use that software to help manage the fund and evaluate the progress of all of our different programs. Hopefully that advanced, Catherine. If you give me a thumbs up, you're seeing the new slide. Okay, great. So the key elements of our Green Revolving Fund policy are shown on the screen. I'm not going to read through them all for you. They're put there, and I'm happy to share our policy. It is on our website, www.summerland.ca, for anybody to take a look. And again, you can feel free to contact me at any time with any questions. But I'll just draw your attention to the scoring criteria. As I mentioned, the primary criteria and the way that we're looking is around our greenhouse gas emissions, and then the ability to repay the fund. And however, we have a secondary set of scoring criteria that we do look at, and they're all scored. So these are all really important to us. We're trying to implement that triple bottom line thinking, that's what we call low carbon resilience thinking, where we're not only looking at mitigating climate change, but also adapting and also bringing the co-benefits of climate action to our community. So we've embedded all of that into our policy. We do have a priority on projects that are 5 years or less for payback in terms of that secondary scoring criteria. Now, I'm going to show you just the application package that we created. Some very simple forms that we put together. A cover page is always nice, makes it look a little more official, lets people feel like they're picking up a package, something that they can really dig into rather than just a bunch of forms and paperwork that I'm asking them to fill out. A flow chart, which I'll share with you in a moment. We have an application form. It's a simple 2-pager, a fillable PDF. We did look through quite a number of other possible application forms from other funds through that $1 Billion Green Challenge organization, and just sort of picked the parts that we thought made the most sense for us. Then we created a mock-up of the application form. We basically filled it in for a mock project and included that in our package so that staff could see this is what we're expecting of them. And finally, we did attach the policy. Some key things as we were working through that application package were to really look for other green revolving funds and what they were doing. I'm a big fan of what I call R&D, rip off and duplicate. You know, we're all municipalities, we're all working for the same sort of goals, and we generally have the same kinds of assets and problems. So why not just use what each other are doing? Now, there aren't many municipalities that I found with green revolving funds, but there are quite a few universities, which again, share many of our same challenges and problems. So we looked at what others are doing for their best practices and reached out through the $1 Billion Green Challenge to find out sort of what people are finding or their stumbling points or their biggest successes. We tested the forms with our user group. So these are the foreman, the plumber, right? These are not the senior managers. These are the people who I'm going to be expecting to be generating the ideas and coming forward with the ask for budget. They're going to be coming, and so they need to know how to use the forms and what kinds of questions and things I'm going to be asking them when they're requesting funds. Of course, saved everything in an accessible location, and then we're advertising the fund through all of our different department meetings, senior management, our climate action team members, and through those one-on-one conversations when people ask me, hey, Tami, I've got an idea. Do you have any money for me, basically? So here's the flow chart. Again, I'm not going to read it out to you, but you can see that we tried to make it pretty easy at a glance, tried to make it quite clear about what's the responsibility of the applicant versus the administrator, so myself and our team. And then I'll just click through, and the items that are appearing in orange are the ones where we created separate forms for these. So we have an application form, an internal review and scoring form so we can keep consistent, an agreement that we work out with the manager of the department where the request is coming from to say you agree to pay back the fund. And I'll just be clear that our fund, the way that it works, as you'll see sort of down here in the bottom right, is we take back the energy savings from the project every year until the loan that we've given is paid back. And then we also take an additional year of savings basically as an interest payment so that we can grow the fund. And after that, the savings just continue to flow to the department where the project was generated out of. So that's what the agreement lays out. So everybody's clear about what their responsibilities are. We also require progress reports. We don't try to make them very, burdensome for our staff, but we do want to just let people know, hey, you need to keep an eye on things, be doing your measurement and verification, check in, let us know if there's any questions or problems, are we meeting the targets, and we can work through problems together. And then we have a project closeout form finally. So quickly, I'll just let you know about our challenges and opportunities. Challenges, getting that initial buy-in from the senior management team, always tricky. One more thing, why do we have to make things so complicated? All those song lyrics, right? So getting that buy-in from them up front was a little bit tricky, but certainly letting them know the rationale, letting them know that this is a leadership opportunity for us to be that first governmental body in Canada to take this on certainly helps sweeten the pot. Balancing detail and brevity is always a problem of mine, wanting to put enough detail in, wanting to have enough information, but also not wanting them to pick up a book or a binder and say, well, you want me to do what? Forget about it, I'll just pay for it out of my own pocket if I have to, Getting agreement on the scoring criteria took a bit of back and forth, but I think we nailed it down pretty well. And then, as I mentioned, we already have some funding available. And so as we're moving forward with the Green Revolving Fund, I'm already starting to see people say, well, I'll just use the basic funding that's available through the Climate Action Reserve, or I'll just use stuff out of that base policy. I don't really need to go through all of this hoopla around a revolving fund. Sounds interesting, but maybe more trouble than it's worth. So that's something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on and thinking about how we can push people into the revolving fund as well. And then, of course, like all of us, COVID-19 has definitely affected the timing of rolling this out. We did sort of a pilot, and then we were ready to really roll out the program earlier this year, and then COVID hit. So it's been a bit delayed, but we're looking forward to moving forward in 2021. So in terms of opportunities, having somebody that's dedicated to administer the fund and to answer any questions and to go through the work of getting it set up, probably a little tricky to do off the corner of someone's desk, can be done, especially if you do some of that R&D I talked about, but can be tricky. So for us, we were lucky to have a dedicated staff person. I already mentioned the network and the GRITS tool, excellent resources, highly recommend if you're looking at setting up a fund to get in touch with them and access their library. Developing those forms and making sure that you provide guidance, right? Not just handing people some forms and saying, fill these out. Not everybody speaks our language. Not everyone's thinking about these things on a day-to-day basis. And so we need to just help them out with a little bit of guidance. Having the reserve fund grow over time through that extra payment that I mentioned at the end of the savings being repaid. And overall, I think I would just say that, even if a lot of people don't use the fund and it doesn't really get the traction we were hoping for, it's still a really effective tool for communicating with staff and the community and council, frankly, about the kinds of things that we need to be considering when we're planning a capital project and how we can work through some of these problems in a meaningful way together. So a little bit over time, sorry for the technical difficulties, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tami. That was great. There's a lot to be learned through your experience. You had a lot of really great insights and challenges to share with everyone. That was great. Just to elaborate a little bit on the trouble or challenge of engaging the senior management team, was there a particular strategy that you found to be effective in really winning them over in the end, or was it kind of just little strategies along the way? Was there anything that stood out?
So I've got really sharp elbows, first of all, so just getting in there. But no, I think honestly, the big thing is always putting it back to council and really looking at the strategic priorities of council and reminding my fellow managers that, you know, yeah, it might be work, but council's laid out a policy, right? Council's given us this direction, and this is one of their strategic priorities, and it's our job to implement that. And so this is an effective way to implement that. And here's the reasons why. You know, you're fortunate to have a dedicated staff person, and I'll be taking it on, right? Like, this isn't going to be more work for you. And frankly, it's going to help us save money, right? So it's going to address some of our budget challenges, and it's going to help us achieve our strategic priorities. And really just refocusing on that, I think was effective, as well as letting them go through. I did a demo of the Grit software with them to say, look, this is super easy. It's really intuitive. This isn't going to be a big, difficult thing for us to manage.
Right, right.
Can I ask, Tami, what, like, have you had any applications yet? And if so, what kind of projects they might be?
So as I mentioned, we were about to sort of roll it out in earnest when COVID hit, but we did do a pilot project with something called Real Ice, which is an ice resurfacing technology. It creates a centrifuge as ice is going into the Zamboni or ice machine that takes out the air bubbles and means that you can lower the air temperature. You don't have to preheat the water. It creates thicker ice so it doesn't melt as fast and so on. So we did use that as a pilot through the software to sort of test it out, but we haven't rolled it out quite yet.
Thank you.
Just to touch a bit, were there any other groups that you had difficult engaging, or was it really more on the senior management level?
I'd say mostly, and not even all of the managers, you know, I lumped them all in together as a group, but, you know, definitely they were the trickier ones. My frontline staff are always looking for opportunities to do things better, but they're always kind of held up, or often held up, I should say, by budget, right? When they approach their supervisors, like, well, we can't afford that, right? We're just going to have to stick with the basics, guys. And so I think they're really excited about an opportunity to be able to do these things that it doesn't only benefit the environment, it's also them, right? Like, I've got guys who work in parks who, when we got them battery operated equipment, were so happy because they didn't have fumes blowing in their face all day, right? So for them, there's multiple benefits, which is why we include those scoring criteria in our applications to prioritize them. But I think the frontline staff were really excited about this from the sort of test user groups that we went around with.
Great. Great. We do have a question here from the audience. How did you come up with the 0.001% figure, and any tips on the process?
So roughly that was what we were spending when I said we went through that, like, department by department. I sort of worked it back and said, okay, we don't want to have a big jump or a big decrease in what we're dedicating to climate action. So what's that budget number look like? And it fortunately kind of worked out to about that. And it also looks really small. It's a tiny number. And so sometimes, because for a small community, at least when I started 4 years ago, it was quite unique to have a dedicated staff resource for this kind of work. Sometimes we get criticisms or questions about, why are you spending so much money on climate action? And this was like it's 0.001%, guys, right? It's a really tiny amount, right? In terms of the process, I would say as much as you can get in front of council, as much as you can link it back to official community plans and strategic priorities, and just really keep that the focus. The co-benefits piece, again, for those of you outside of BC, I really encourage you to look up this project out of Simon Fraser University that's around low carbon resiliency. If you just Google low carbon resiliency or LCR, you're going to find a ton of information. We're working with them closely, and there's a whole table and a whole set of documents for mayors and elected officials around the co-benefits of this work, so that it's not all about the environment, right? It's about health, it's about well-being, the economy, all of these things that councillors are, at least in theory, really dedicated to and really focused on, even if the environment isn't their key focus. So those were the strategies that I think are most important, is dedicating their focus there and enshrining it in policy. Policy is a huge help.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, Tami, for taking the time to share your story with everyone. I think you've given people a lot to think about and how they could maybe start down the road of implementing their own green revolving fund. So, and thank you for waking up early to join us.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
So thank you so much. And
Catherine will, sorry, just to interrupt, that resource for from Simon Fraser, maybe we'll get that from you, Tami, and post that with when we put the proceedings together, because that would be really helpful.
Sure, I'll put a link.
Looking for that.
Yeah, I'll put a link into the chat box here.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks everybody. Have a great day.
You too. Take care. Okay. Next up, we have Craig Stevens from the town of Caledon speaking to their energy revolving fund.
Great. Let me see if I can get this share screen to work properly.
So much fun.
Yes, isn't it all? So down here. Where is the... Sorry, that's the difficulty of using two screens. How's that look now, Catherine?
That looks great. Looks perfect.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you and good morning, and thank you for having me. Awesome placement to follow up with Tami's presentation there. It's great to hear what's happening on the other side of the country. And she's quite right in saying that municipalities, regions, cities, we're all faced with the same challenges, same financial restrictions and budgetary restrictions. So it is great to hear what's happening. And I'm sorry if I repeat any similar things, but maybe we can at least drive home this concept of an energy revolving fund and how it works and how it may work for you and your organization going forward. So my name is Craig Stevens. I'm the Energy and Environmental Specialist at the town of Caledon, just northwest of the city of Toronto in Ontario. And this is going to be a presentation on how we've gone about things and where it's taken us so far. So let's start with the problem statement. So as a governing body, we are faced with the complex challenge of meeting our corporate energy goals while also trying not to increase our tax rate or taking on debt, something that no council member, mayor, or member of the public really wants, right? So we know how to save energy, we know the technology necessary, there's many people who are ready to assist, and we have loads of projects ready to complete at any given time. However, it comes down to the financing and any realistic expectations. So that's where the concept of an energy revolving fund can really help you meet your targets without drawing off of the capital annual budget. And Catherine, I just want to make sure my slides are progressing. Thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you. So an energy revolving fund, what is it and how does it work? So first, you do need to start with the base fund. That's really the basis of any revolving fund going forward. And this is an allotted amount that can be used to finance your energy projects. However, you want it to be also sustainable. And that's why it's circular, of course, is that you always want to have funds being re-injected back into your fund to sustain you in the future. So any of these projects do need to make practical and financial sense. And this means different things for different organizations, but to put it simply, the shorter the simple payback, the better, right? So once a project is approved, then the energy project or retrofit is implemented. So we have implementation stage. And once that is completed and operational, and once there is enough data, then there needs to be some sort of measurement and verification to verify the actual amount of financial and greenhouse gas savings. Once the MMV is complete, you can then complete the circular cycle by investing these savings back into your initial fund. So that's a pretty basic explanation, but I'll delve into a couple of more details, at least for the town of Caledon's revolving fund as we go forward here. So not all revolving funds are the same. There are many options out there for how a fund is initially financed, how it's administrated, and the thresholds of projects and paybacks. So in 2015, when the town of Caledon was initially looking to create our energy revolving fund, we did a municipal scan, of course, and just found just that, really. Municipalities across Ontario, across Canada, for that matter, all had different designs for their revolving funds. So these are a little bit dated from 2015, but this is at least what we found at that time. For Guelph, it was a finance-led initiative where the fund was built up through the difference between actual and budgeted costs of projects. For Midland, Ontario, the fund was established against capital reserves. In Hamilton, excess from their corrected bills was diverted back into their fund. And then in Thunder Bay, they were able to repurpose their existing energy reserve fund and top it up with savings and incentives that were found. All are premised on finding dollars that already exist or savings that can be found and repurposed. And all are great methods to initially build that base fund that can then be drawn off of for energy projects. For the town of Caledon, the perfect funding opportunity did already exist for us. In 2011, the town had installed 3 ground mount solar arrays. The size of each array is 10 kilowatts, and they generate an approximate 45,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year. These arrays were installed under the microfit program, which was providing a 20-year contract, and they're currently generating approximately $25,000 a year annually. So this annual amount built the basis of our reserve fund and continues to grow our fund year over year and providing the sustainability of our fund. In order to implement the corporate energy revolving fund, the corporate energy team was created internally to fairly and adequately and inclusively complete corporate energy projects. The corporate energy team is made up of staff from the Energy and Environment Division, managers of recreation and civic facilities, managers of facility operations, and the manager of purchasing. With this range of roles and responsibilities throughout the organization, we're able to include input in every step along the way, from somebody who has firsthand experience all the way up to the manager type role. The corporate energy team is the governing body of corporate energy goals and targets and is responsible for energy conservation within facilities and formalizing strategic energy management. So we host 4 quarterly meetings throughout the year to discuss ongoing and future energy projects, any lessons learned about maybe new implemented technologies installed, and in order to share any experiences with one another. So at these meetings, we showcase what facilities and staff are leading the charge for energy efficiency and stimulate some friendly competition even between facilities. And then at the end of the year, we do have members of council or the mayor present awards to the top performing buildings and staff to recognize their hard work and achievements in energy management. So this is just a photo of our corporate energy team from, I believe it was last year. And skip past this. There we go. So we have our seed funding. The solar arrays are providing our seed funding. Here's how the rest works. The 3 solar arrays, they generate the input capital under the annual microfit program. The corporate energy team then proposes energy projects, and we build a business case to see if they are feasible and what incentives, if any, are available. For town projects, the simple payback must be 10 years or less. That is our threshold. Oftentimes, these projects have already been identified through previous facility energy audits or are trialed at other town facilities. So we do have a good idea of the cost and the savings along the way. So once it is approved, the retrofit is financed and implemented. When the project is complete, energy and environmental staff will perform internal M&V or will go to an external party for some measurement and verification, and also to verify the financial savings of the project. The monetary savings are then submitted back into a revolving fund until the project is paid off, after which 25% of the annual savings is injected back into the revolving fund annually. So this also creates the sustainability of our fund. Also, any incentives that are received by the fund for these projects are also included and injected into the fund. So it really does build up a decent amount that we can use year over year. So since 2015, $352,000 have been dispersed for corporate energy projects. About 632,000 equivalent kilowatt hours have been shaved and saved. And annually, the corporate energy projects save approximately 70,000 in utility bills. The type of projects really range between LEDs being the most common, since they do provide such a strong business case and return on investment with a simple payback. But other projects do include refrigeration plant controls and infrared camera controls for ice rinks and at our arenas. Another retrofit that was financed, similar to what Tami was mentioning, is a real ice technology, as you can see in the photo there. We found great savings. It has a very quick return on investment. So it's something that has been pushed through our corporate energy revolving fund a couple of times now, and it has been proven for us at least. Challenges encountered, to be quite frank, there have been very little challenges that we've encountered, and overall the process has been quite smooth. However, one of the challenges is we currently have a limit to how low our reserve can go. So this limit is a $100,000 reserve, which we can't dip under. And this challenges the limit of project sizes and the amount of projects that we can complete in a year. It's something that we are planning to bring up with finance, since we've had about 5 years of data now and projects ongoing. And we've kind of proven that the level of risk is actually quite low with these energy projects. So dipping below that $100,000 threshold to a lower amount could be a very reasonable option for us going forward. The second challenge, which is more of a stipulation, is that is that we have a limit of a maximum 10-year simple payback threshold for any projects. So for the most part, our projects have been able to fall under that 10-year guideline, but there have been some larger projects that could benefit from a longer payback period. So solar being the most obvious with an approximate 15 to 20-year payback. Understandably, though, we would need to have a mix of short and long-term payback projects just in order to keep this fund sustainable for future projects. Both of these challenges, I realize, are fairly minute issues to have, and they are the source of a successful program. We're now looking at ways to further our impact that we can have through our revolving fund. For lessons learned, oftentimes facility managers and staff are strapped for capital with only enough to continue operations or complete capital replacement of equipment at the end of their lifetime. That's pretty obvious to all municipalities. I think we're all in that same boat at the end of the day. And it's sometimes why energy efficiency is not considered as a key component to equipment replacement. With the introduction of a corporate energy revolving fund, operators now have an alternative source of funding to complete replacements that they may not have had otherwise. And so energy efficiency can become a priority for any retrofits in the future. The revolving fund and the quarterly team meetings, the experience of facility staff implementing and using new technology, it really adds to the educational piece for any operators and operations going forward. So we find that staff more oftentimes now look for these efficiency opportunities rather than just replacing like for like, which seemed to be the case previously at least. Energy audits can be a very, very useful tool for a revolving fund since it really spells out the changes and costs associated for specific facilities. So it's very common for us to first look at the energy audit on a building by building basis and see what projects are going to be proposed in the next year or two, and then kind of work backward from there and do some research as to what might be the most efficient options for us. A lot of the time, facility staff just don't have the time to develop the business case. So some projects can be trickier, but some things like LED lighting, they have a fairly clear calculation. So we set them up with a nice, easy to use business case tool that allows them to plug in some simple project details and get their results right away. So this educates staff so that they can make their own calculations for any projects maybe going forward in the future and feel like they are really taking the project from the beginning phases to the end and really making a good difference. Energy and environment staff, our team, we typically facilitate and meet with staff in order to discuss any project details, go over the business case and assist when necessary. However, we try our best to make it as easy as possible for them, since, like I mentioned, they oftentimes have multiple projects and timelines that they're juggling. Building operator knowledge is essential. No one knows the building, its systems, how it all works better than the operators themselves. That's kind of a given. But one of the benefits we found from the revolving fund and from the corporate energy team meetings is that once installed, the operators share their feedback with the group. And oftentimes it is, well, the majority of times it is quite positive. So hearing that positive feedback from a fellow operator of a similar facility within the same municipality, it really grows that confidence in these new technologies and really promotes the energy improvements and engages others. Buy-in from all levels, from occupant, operator to management. If it hasn't been obvious yet, it is important to have buy-in from all levels of the organization. Energy management is a team task and really everybody's role and responsibility. So including everybody in the decision-making, in the success is so worthwhile. There is an internal time commitment, like Tami mentioned. It is worthwhile to have staff that are able to put the time in that is necessary to build a business case, to complete incentives and grant applications, and communicate with operators, managers, and the like, to keep an energy focus on all projects. So then lastly, and again, I bold this, of course, because it is so important, recognition is really the key to a successful revolving fund. Recognition and communication. So maintain communication with all facility operators and managers, talk to them, ask them questions, but most of all, listen to them. Operators know the building best. They will share their insights that maybe cannot always be seen from your energy management software or from brief conversations with managers that aren't at the facility every day. So when a project is completed and successful, make it well known. Make it known that they are responsible for the savings and how much it is appreciated within the town. So that is why we at the town of Caledon do have these awards at the end of the year, and oftentimes are presented from the mayor or members of the council. So it's little things like that that can really keep everybody engaged and involved and feeling quite positive about the process going forward. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening, and my contact information is up on this slide. Happy to chat through any questions or comments with anyone. So thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Craig. That was really great. The town of Caledon, as always, is doing really great things and a lot of really great insights and lessons learned to share with your counterparts. So that was super helpful. We have a couple of questions related to your corporate energy management team. So can you elaborate a little more on the team? So how is it established? How often do you meet? I believe quarterly, you said, but
yeah,
confirm that, and any challenges with the operations of the team.
For sure. Yeah, it is a quarterly meetings that we have. And the corporate energy team is built up from everybody involved in facility operations as well as members of finance. But the purpose of it is to come together to talk about what's been done within that last quarter, what the plans are for the future, any advice that one another can share to each other going forward. And also we do try to implement some sort of educational piece as well. So we might have somebody come in, a professional, engage in some sort of case study or learning or experiential education piece that we can bring back. It's been a trickier year this year being online. We're trying to keep up with everything, but it can be quite difficult. Most normal years we would probably have a nice meeting room with pizza, food is always good, and really have a great meeting that is a couple of hours so we can really delve into things. With online, it has been a more difficult experience for sure. But at the same time, facility operators, they're there on site, and they know the buildings well, so they're telling us what's different, what's going on, whereas we're just looking at our energy management software. We see maybe some spikes or falls in consumption. That's when we can engage in the conversation with the operators and say, hey, maybe something happened at the facility. Can you expand on that at all? And quite oftentimes there's a very logical explanation, and we can track that and make sense of things going forward.
Great. And a very specific question, who makes the decisions on which projects get funded?
That's a good question. It does go up sort of through the chain of command, starts usually at the operator level. It will typically come to us at Energy and Environment, and we'll speak with the managers, and then we will present it to council in a report. And of course, finance does have to administrate the financials as well. So it really is that hierarchy or going up the ladder per se. But at the end of the day, I think as long as the business case is well done and correctly done, which we have built it to be, it's a very simple tool to use that shows the potential impact. I don't think we've had much challenge along the way for getting any projects passed.
Great. And I guess the final question, which pretty much touched on most of this, but the organizational structure of the energy team, I think you sort of covered that already, and how it facilitates the management of the fund, which I think you've pretty much covered, but if you could elaborate a little.
Yeah, for sure. So the operators and sometimes energy and environment staff will come up with the idea. We will then build the business case, usually together as a team, just to make sure it does make sense. We will apply to any incentives that are out there, of course, take advantage of that as much as possible. And then we do bring it to council, and usually it does get approved with no problems. So it's kind of nice, and council and management do like to see it because it is not coming out of capital budget, right? That is the benefit of this revolving fund, as it's something separate and tangible that we can use for things that aren't necessarily within the year's capital expenditure, right? So it gives that added level of opportunity for taking on projects that might not otherwise be considered.
And to just the elaboration on the organizational structure of your energy team, I think you have operators on your energy team as well as facility management staff. Anyone else? And you're obviously yourselves, the energy and environment group. Anyone else on the team?
That's the majority of it. We do try to include finance when possible. That is the majority of things, though. Yeah, it's typically our facility staff and managers.
Thanks.
I think we have one more question here. So it sounds like your focus is mainly on recreational facilities. Does your office also consider larger projects such as recommissioning or deep retrofits to municipal buildings?
Yeah, definitely. As long as it fits within the business case, the 10-year simple payback threshold, anything is on the table. You're right, I did mention recreation facilities seeming to be the most. That's just because our buildup of facilities are primarily recreational, but we do have fire halls, town hall, of course, and some other buildings that there have been some very successful projects, LED projects, and we have been looking at geothermal as well as air source heat pumps for water heaters. That's at town hall, and commissioning quite possibly could fall under this revolving fund. It hasn't yet. But if the business case was brought forward and it did make sense and fall into our thresholds, then there would be no reason not to.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Craig. That was really, really helpful. Thanks for sharing your story of everything that's going on at the town of Caledon, continuing to do great work, and we're excited to see what you do next year.
Great, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so I would like to thank all of our speakers again for giving us an in-depth look at energy performance contracting, commercial financing, and revolving funds, all of which are great financing options. There are a couple of additional financing mechanisms we've not covered today. We thought we'd briefly touch on them just to give a full picture of available options. So of course, group purchasing, which is a means of taking advantage of the power of collective buying to obtain discounts on goods and services. So group purchasing has long been used by the medical and farming industries, but it's increasingly being used by municipalities and not-for-profit organizations to purchase renewable energy and other clean technologies. There's also community-owned renewable power, which refers to clean energy products owned by a group of community members who receive energy and or financial benefits from the renewable energy systems without the onus of procuring, owning, and maintaining those over the lifetime. So more information on these, including key considerations, examples, and resources, can be found in this guide released by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. They also cover local improvement charges in this guide, but we haven't included them here as we're really focusing on municipal buildings. So here's the link to that guide if you're interested in some of the other financing options. Another great resource is that may be of interest, developed by the Energy Sector Management Assistance Program. So this guide discusses a range of different financing mechanisms. It includes budget financing, so direct financing from municipal budgets, the use of external grants, budget capture mechanisms. It covers revolving funds, different public sector financing, commercial financing. So it really illustrates all of these different options quite well, helps you understand which may be most viable for your given situation. I've got a complete set of case studies in here. So it's quite a useful guide, so you may want to check that out as well. And as most of you are aware, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities offers a variety of different funding opportunities through the Green Municipal Fund. I won't read them off the slide. Patrick from FCM presented this at our webinar back in September. But really the core energy funding program is the most high demand, and they have a new program for large community buildings coming out in the spring. So stay tuned for all of those. And as a sponsor of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge, Enbridge Gas continues to provide support for the municipalities. They help by providing free expertise and support, help identify applicable incentives, and help connect you with other partners. And they offer a variety of energy efficiency programs, such as retrofit programs, no-cost, low-cost programs, such as Run It Right, which many of our members have gone through that, and new construction as well. And Enbridge is also committed to finding the right technologies for individual buildings. So we're particularly interested in emerging technologies and projects which are going to be critical to achieving large greenhouse gas reductions that we're looking for. And we haven't included other incentive programs from across the country due to the sheer number of them. But of course, look at the various incentive programs offered in your province. But I would like to give a shout out to the Municipal Climate Change Action Center in Alberta, who offer a variety of different funding programs, information, and support for municipalities in Alberta. And they've been really helpful in getting the word out about our event to municipalities in Alberta. So thank you to them. And I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank all of today's speakers and sponsors: Johnson Controls, Vancity Investment Bank, Tami Rothery, Craig Stevens. They've all given us a lot to think about when it comes to financing your different projects, your energy and greenhouse gas reduction projects specifically. So our member municipalities, like we've mentioned before, have indicated financing continues to be one of the key challenges that they face, and especially as they seek to meet these really ambitious climate commitments. So please, as always, members, let us know if there's any other financing options you'd like to hear about, or if you'd like to explore anything in more detail in 2021. And again, I'd like to thank all of our speakers from day 1 and day 2 of the forum as well. So on day 2, we had the town of Whitby, the city of St. John, New Brunswick, and the town of Halton Hills, speaking to how they put their asset management systems and other systems in place to really change how decisions are made, how they prioritize projects, how they get work done to reflect the climate goals that they're trying to achieve. And we're excited to follow all of these municipalities on their journey forward. And thank you again to Simcoe Refrigeration for their essential role in the Net Zero Ice Rinks pilot, both in terms of sponsorship as well as technical expertise, particularly in the area of heat recovery, which is emerging as a really critical component in the net zero vision for ice rinks and other municipal building types as well. So I think the big message from the forum overall, getting existing buildings to net zero will not be easy. But if we get organized now, so that was one of the key takeaways on day one, if we get organized now, have an end vision for each and every facility, starting with the high priority facilities, of course, and working collectively towards the common goal, we will be able to get there. So thank you very much for joining us for this year's forum. We hope you've been just as inspired as we have been. As Jillian mentioned, we'll be sending out session recordings and forum proceedings to all attendees and posting them on our website as well. And if you have any questions about any content or questions for any of our speakers, please feel free to let me know and we'll get those answers to you.